Welcome back to Cross Tactics. I hope you are doing fantastic. Today I'm going to do a maintenance video. I've got a couple of clients that requested I do one. I figured for the longest time there's enough maintenance videos online for people to check, but I suppose it is a good idea to have one on my channel for people that bought systems from us. Quick and easy way to go and check. So any projectile system, triggered projectile weapon system, is going to require maintenance. Any tool that you have is going to require maintenance. So it is not logical to think you can buy a system like this and not perform any maintenance tasks and have it function flawlessly. So it's not a lot to do. There really isn't. But they have to be done. So what you're going to want to check, right? It's important when you assemble it to make sure your set screw is tight. Your set screw is this screw in the front, right? You can see it there. That keeps the bow limb in place, keeps it secure. Very easy to feel whether it's loose. Take the body of your crossbow, wiggle this, and you can feel if it's loose or not. You can also check by the rubber, right? Because there's a buffer plate and rubber. So the rubber compresses out. I'm not sure if you can see it on there. The rubber on the sides there compresses out. So if the screw is getting looser, that compression, you will see it's starting to recede back in. But yeah, the best way is to feel your limb, or just take your Allen key, put it in there, and see if it's tight or not. So I don't necessarily check mine. I do recommend you do, because I've tightened mine so much that it does not rattle loose. It never will. I didn't put any kind of Loctite or anything like that in there. It just is tight enough that it doesn't rattle loose. So that's going to be something you're going to have to check. So after every shooting session that you do, let's say you got a target up, you're going to go practice, put like 2-3 magazine loads full through it, then just check it. When you're going to put it away, pack it away, check it, make sure it's tight. Then you know next time you shoot, it's going to be fine. Okay, so that's your set screw out of the way. Some systems don't require this, but most crossbows, whether it's big, whether it's small, have set screws to hold the limbs in place, especially if it is a recurve, single construction recurve bow. I don't deal really with compound bows with cams and pulleys and all of that. My personal opinion is that the more moving parts you have, the larger margin of error you have. And I see it all the time where people with compound bows break their bows and they have to take it in to get fixed, etc. Very rarely do I see someone that breaks a recurve bow, the actual bow, unless you're going to be dry firing and all of that. And that is another important thing that everyone should know, that it is assumed you know when you take or when you buy a crossbow, purchase a crossbow, is that dry firing is going to damage your bow. All that excess vibration that energy has nowhere to go. So dry firing is cocking the crossbow, shooting it without any bolts in it. So avoid that. Okay? If you've got it cocked and you realize there's no bolts in it, which I don't know how that would happen, because you're supposed to leave a bolt in here, right? It takes 7. You shoot 6 shots, leave the last bolt in, put your next stack on top. So there should always be a bolt in the system. But if you're going to want to control release it, you have it cocked, brace it against your body, right? And then pull the trigger and bring it up slowly. Okay? If you want to know what that looks like, we'll cock it quickly, right? Now it's cocked. Even if I have it cocked and there's one ready to shoot, right? I'm ready to shoot. And there's nothing to shoot at. Then you can do a controlled release like this. Brace it against your body, pull the trigger, and slowly let it up. You'll see the bolt come out the front. There you go. Now this bolt, take out, So yeah, that's your set screw and your string. The next thing. So before I move on, set screw, some systems don't require it, but most do. For example, the Steamboat Stinger Tactical is a quick exchange limb system, so it has no set screw. This whole block, that whole block, comes out with the bow and gets put back in. There are other systems that also has that. For example, the EK Archery Adder also has that. Let's see if I can get it out here. So the Adder, big, cumbersome, heavy system, slow to cock and prone to misfires. I've got an anti-jamming mechanism in here that I manually installed to make sure it doesn't jam. Anyway, it's not the point. I get sidetracked a little bit. It's also got a limb, a quick exchange system. Right, so this whole block comes out with the limb, gets put back in. So, but this block does have a set screw in there. So the block itself does have a set screw if you want to take the limb off. Anyway, let me try and put this back quickly. Okay, back onto the string. So, the string, you want to keep it waxed. Some people say, I mean, on some labels, like for example the Adder, it says after every 5 shots. That's a bit ridiculous if you ask me. So what does wax look like? Get it in a tube like this. A tube like this should last you a lifetime, man. Honestly. So people say you've got to wax the rail, or rather the flight track, which I don't do. If you've got wax on your flight track, you're going to have dust that settles on there, gets stuck on it, etc. It doesn't speed up the bolts. The wax is to preserve your string. So you put it on these twines, right? And maybe on your serving. I put a little bit on my serving, and then I make sure this is waxed. Strings that you buy, a replacement string, comes pre-waxed, so there's already wax on the string. So yeah, keep your strings waxed, and they'll be preserved for a longer time. If you see your serving, that's the center of the string, the piece that is wrapped around the string that actually pushes the bolt. That if it starts coming undone, you can always rewrap it with the same material, right? I use a lot of string, so I have string that have, like a box with a bunch of string that have been used and reused, etc. I take pieces of old string that I don't use anymore and reserve my string. Also, replacement string's not that expensive. It should last you anywhere between 250 to 350 shots, depending on your on how much you wax it, etc. I like to wax mine when it feels dry, when I can feel it with my finger and it starts feeling dry. It's mostly when I wax it. The system will function 100% reliably without waxing your string if you need it in a pinch, in an emergency. Okay, so that is string. Keep it waxed. It is a consumable. Like I say, it is going to wear out. And okay, next thing's your bolts. You want to make sure your bolts are straight and there's no defects. Okay, when you get new bolts, they should be straight. It's after you've shot them into something hard or whatever that it might not be straight anymore. So make sure your shaft is 100% straight. Make sure your tip is straight. Make sure your fletching is straight. Everything needs to be straight. The fletching and the knock is one piece on these bolts, right? If this ever comes loose, you can just super glue it back in. These bolts should last you a very long time. If you preserve them, shoot them into soft targets, shoot them into trees, etc. And they should last you a very long time. And yeah, make sure they're straight. If the bolt's not straight, it's not going to feed properly through here. And it's also not going to fly. The trajectory is not going to be optimal, right? You're going to have accuracy issues. So, also, sorry, let me take bolt out again. If you have these screw on, right? Mine does not come off because I take each bolt I use, take the tip off, and put a small little dollop of super glue on the thread and thread them back in. Because I know I'm never going to exchange these tips for anything else. So if you're not going to do that, then make sure your bolts are screwed on tight, the tip, all the time. In transport, in shipping, they rattle loose. You'll see if you buy a pack of bolts, you'll see the tips are normally threaded loose. So super glue them in, or make sure they are threaded on tightly before you shoot them. When you take them out to target, check that thread, or super glue them. I highly recommend the super gluing. I never have to worry about my bolts, right? Also because I use a soft target. So I know that absorbs the energy. So I know my bolts aren't going to bend, right? If you're shooting them into hard targets like wood, you are going to end up with bent shafts, bent tips, etc. Also, you can avoid bending them and putting dents in them, etc. by spreading your shots out. When we provide targets in our system, in our box, when we send it off or when someone collects, we have at least 6 separate targets. So you can take a shot at one, move on to the next one, move on to the next one, instead of trying to group them all together and have your bolts hit into each other. If you can avoid your bolts hitting each other in the target, they'll live even longer. I mean, I don't buy new bolts for myself. I use the same bolts over and over and over, thousands of times over. Okay? So, that's your bolts. If you're going to be using broadheads, make 100% sure that the blade and the fletching are in line. Okay? You don't want the blade in the front to be like that and your fletching to be straight. You want the blade and the fletching to be 100% straight. Sometimes when you get broadhead bolts, depending on brand, quality, etc., you might find that they're slightly off center. You can fix that, pliers and whatnot. So, that's bolts covered, and yeah, check there's no bends. Sorry, I'm just reading notes here as well. Check there's no bends, tips and knocks. Oh, and you can wash them after use. That's what I do. I wash my bolts after use to make sure there's no pieces of target that are stuck onto them or whatever that's going to end up on my rail. So yeah, after a shooting session, I take the bolts and I just wipe them down with a wet cloth. That's normally sufficient for me. What's the next thing? Yes. Next thing is your flight track. We basically covered that already. Keep it clear of dust. Your flight track is where the bolt actually flies down your barrel. So keep that clear of any debris, dust, etc. There's a little bit of dust on here. It's not going to matter. It's still going to shoot, right? That's not a big issue. But you want to be as accurate as possible. You want to keep your system as clean as possible. Yeah, that's basically it. And just some important notes when assembling: set screw and end caps. End caps. Put your end caps on properly. If you don't put these on properly, in our manual we send with it, we make sure to state that you got to put these on properly, right? If you don't make sure these are slipped on all the way, and you try to put your string on, it's going to snap the end cap, your string's going to come off, it could pose all kinds of dangers. So make sure your end caps are 100% on. If you have to, take something like the back of a screwdriver, tap it on, or a small hammer or something, or even take it like this. I've done that before, and just knock it on the table, right? But you should be able to, with your thumb, press it on all the way, right? You can, for example, if you want to make sure it's on all the way, before you put it on, make a little marking where it should be, right? Hold it next to the prod. You'll see it has a piece that slides in there, right? Make a little marking and make sure this has gone all the way to where you marked it. Okay? Right. Hope that makes sense to everybody. And think I covered all the maintenance stuff. That really is it. Make sure your screws are nice and nice and tight. That one specifically. There are other screws you don't want to over tighten, but that's got to do with assembly. We do state that in the manual, not to over tighten them. So yeah, just important notes for assembling. And I'll go over that again when I do another assembly video. Yeah, don't over tighten screws, specifically the screw in the back here. Don't use a power drill, whatever, right? You want to be able to feel it with your hand. When that screw starts giving resistance, stop turning, okay? I mean, you until it stops it, but don't try and over tighten it, right? Other than that, the smaller screws and stuff should be fine. You can check them. It's probably a good idea to check that they're not rattling loose. I mean, every time you shoot, you're putting vibrations through the whole system. And yeah, okay, that is that. Another note for assembly, make sure there's a gap between the claws and the strings. Your claws, these are your claws, right? You want to make sure that there is a gap here, right? You see that gap? It can be smaller, but you don't want the string to sit on these claws. You don't want the string to be all the way there, okay? There needs to be a slight gap here. Then you've got the right power stroke going, and your bolts are not going to fall behind the string. Okay, naturally when you put it together there should be a gap there. If there isn't, take a string off, put a couple of twists in it, put it back on. You should put a couple of twists in your string anyway. Okay, I think that's it. And yeah, just an assembly note, whatever. When you've done assembling it, you can cock it without a bolt in it or with a bolt in it, whatever. But cock it, make sure everything functions, and then release, right? Controlled release. Just make sure everything works. We test the system before it leaves our premises, each and every magazine, right? But we don't know how you're going to assemble it if you're going to follow the instructions completely. So that's why I say make sure your system is working as it should before you attempt to start shooting and break things, okay? So if you don't assemble it properly, you start messing around with it, you're going to end up with breakages. For example, one of my first clients didn't do the set screw thing, right? Didn't check his set screws. This became loose. He kept shooting with it. Caused damage here in the hole where the limb goes. Luckily the limb itself, the bow, was fine. But it caused damage in the front here. And he also damaged the actual magazine. I don't know how he did it, but anyway, that's not the point. If it's installed properly, everything should function 100% right. Alright. Hope everybody has a great time, and thank you all to my subscribers. Now, if only every one of my subscribers was a South African and every one of them bought a system, maybe I'd have enough capital to actually start this business, get it off the ground properly. But anyway, get yourself some lasers, guys. Get yourself a laser on there. Get yourself a flashlight. And yeah, do some modifications, man. Personalize your thing. I got this on, I've showed it before. Bolt holder in the front. Easy to personalize it. This is a AR style stock. Got this here so I can put a sling on it. So I can put a sling on it. Put my sling over. Pop it in there. And there you go. Hands free. Now I can open locks, do whatever, smoke my cigarette outside, do whatever, and I know I'm always going to be ready with my crossbow, ready to go. Good. Thanks for watching.